Hiya, Nine. So, what I want to do is tell you a little bit about what religious studies is like at GCSE. Now, obviously, you've done religion, philosophy, and ethics this year. Before this, it wasn't called religion, philosophy, and ethics, but essentially that is still what you were doing. And hopefully, you've really enjoyed some of the subjects that we've been covering. And a lot of them are going to be covered in a lot more detail when you cover it at GCSE. Now, obviously, I know a lot of you have expressed interest, but I wanted this video to just give you a little bit more information about what exactly it is that you'll be covering, what exactly it is that you'll be doing, but also for you to be able to hear from some of the students that have taken it in year 10 this year and are currently in year 11, and a lot of them are taking it in A level as well. So you'll be able to see that progression. So the first thing is you need to know how the exam works, because obviously a lot of you will base your decisions based on what your strengths are. And I'm not going to lie, there's a lot of writing involved. Okay, it's broken down. So you'll have a 2 marker, a 5 marker, an 8 marker, and a 15 marker. And obviously the 15 marker is going to be your longest piece of writing. The 2 marker will be a couple of words max. Okay, so there is something there for everybody. And it doesn't matter whether you're targeted a 2 or a 9, because this is something that's accessible to all people. Okay, so 50% of your qualifications made up by 4 topics: the issues of relationships, the issues of life after death, the issues of good and evil, and the issues of human rights. And this will be a 2-hour exam, and you will have a section on each of these issues. Then you'll have 2 other papers. These are worth 25% of your mark each. And you will have an hour paper on Christianity and an hour paper on Buddhism. Now, what happens is you learn about Christianity and Buddhism in relation to these themes that we look at. And when I say themes, I mean the issues that I've just said. Okay? And what happens is we have these themes and we have the religious beliefs, and what we do is we apply them. But that doesn't mean that we only focus on religion, because we also look at non-religious views and your own views, and look at how having different views can influence people and the way that they behave. Okay, so essentially the main part is going to be to do with these issues, and then the other half is going to be to do with what you learn about with Christianity and Buddhism. Okay, so let's have a look at what it is exactly you'll be covering. So in relationships, we cover a lot of content. We cover things to do with marriage. We cover things to do with the LGBT community. We cover things to do with contraceptive. We cover things to do with whether people should have sex before marriage, the views on cohabitation, the view of women. So there's a lot that's covered in there. And some of the big questions that we'll ask will be things like, should same-sex couples be allowed to marry, or should that be reserved for couples that are heterosexual? Should couples wait until they are married before having sex? Is marriage out of date? Okay, and some of you now will be reading those questions and you'll have a response immediately, and that's what we're looking for, that immediate response, but then looking at other people's views and deciding which argument's the strongest. Okay, so as I said before, it's not about just looking at the religious views, it's looking at your own view, and it's looking at the non-religious views and deciding which is best, which is strongest, which is most convincing. Then we do life after death, okay, or life and death, okay, because essentially what we do is we start way back at the beginning of the universe, okay, and we look at the creation stories, but we also look at the Big Bang Theory, we look at evolution, we look at our relationship with the planet. Should we look after it? Do we have any responsibility for it? And then we move on and we start to look at, do we have the right to take a life? And that starts with abortion and moves all the way through to euthanasia. And then once we've done euthanasia, we also look at, well, what actually happens when we die? Is there anything? Is there nothing? Do we have a soul? Are we just a body? Are we just a physical being that's here for now? And again, some of those big things that we're going to talk about are, should I have the right to end my own life? And we're talking about this in terms of a medical decision. What happens after I die? Is there a heaven? Is there a hell? Is there an issue with there being a hell if God's supposed to be all loving? We look at things like reincarnation. Have people lived before? Have people had near death experiences? When they had that near death experience, did they see something? Is it real what they saw? And are people more important than animals? Okay, so that's the idea of when we look at our responsibility to the world, do we also have a responsibility to animals as well? Should we take care of them or are we above them? Should we be able to treat them however we want to? Then we have a look at good and evil, okay? And we look at things like, are we tough enough on criminals? Now, what I mean by that is, should prison sentences be enough? Or should we have capital punishment, the death penalty? If we do bring back the death penalty, how do we decide who gets it? Is it any murderer? All murderers? Is it only people that have murdered and then murder again? How do we make that decision? We also have a look at, is there such a thing as a bad act, or does it depend on the situation? So when someone does something, okay, so let's say it's stealing, someone breaks into an old person's home and steals their valuables. Now, most of you are thinking, yeah, that is a bad act. But what if we change it and someone breaks in somewhere to steal something because they're desperate? So they break into a house and the only thing that they steal is food, and it's because they were starving. Is this still a bad act, or is it now an acceptable act because the intentions weren't bad? They didn't go there trying to do harm, they went there trying to save their own life. And then this final question, who, if anybody, goes to hell? So that idea again of, if there's a heaven, is it for everybody? Or are some people going to be damned to hell because of the actions that they've done, the choices that they've made? And finally, human rights. So we look at things like, do I have the right to say what I wish, even if it offends people? So we look at the idea of freedom of speech and censorship and look at the issues with both of these and then make a decision about what you think is right. Should there be some censorship so in order to avoid panic? Or should everything be free for everybody to see? Should Christians give away their wealth? Okay, so when we look at the views on Christianity, the strength of the views in things like being charitable, if you think about the charities that you donated for, the things that you have raised money for, then you might be thinking, well, everyone should have to give away some of their wealth in order to help the needy. But then it's the question of, should they give away all of their wealth? Because there's an afterlife, and surely the afterlife is more important than this life. Then how should we deal with racism? Now, we don't stop at racism, we look at sexism, we look at homophobia, and it's this idea of prejudice and discrimination and unpicking them and deciding what's the best course of action when these things happen. We obviously do a unit on Christianity and on Buddhism as well, and we will look at things like this. If God exists, why doesn't he stop evil acts? Now, you've done this year, and we've scraped the surface with this, and we've spoke about concepts like free will, and we do look at those again. This idea of, is Britain still a Christian country? This will be really interesting this year with the new census that's coming out, which essentially asks everybody in the UK whether they are part of a religion or not. And what we've seen since 2001 is a significant drop in the number of people that consider themselves a Christian. So it will be interesting to see whether this year that continues or whether it changes. And we'll look at things like whether it's possible that things like COVID have had an impact on that, and how we could argue that Christianity could still be seen as integral in the UK because of things like our law system. Then this idea of, do Christians believe that heaven and hell are real places? Or is this something that used to be believed, but now those views are changing? In Buddhism, we consider things like, am I just a human body, or is there something else? Is there a soul? Does belief in karma help us to live a good life? And what is the point of meditation? Now, this is what I hear all the time. that you can't get any jobs with a GCSE in religious studies. And it's just simply not true, because lots of people that study RS end up with a really good understanding of how to talk to the community, how to work with the community, how to understand how um, certain things will impact on how a person behaves. And because of that, it gives you the skills for things like teaching, civil service, national security, youth and social work, defence industry, human rights, law, politics, the emergency services, and anything to do with human resources. And it's basically because of those skills that you develop while studying RS and understanding how certain beliefs will impact how a person behaves. And this is what causes people to go into these jobs, and having this GCSE will help you in that. Okay. So the other thing that people tend to like to know is how it works with other subjects. So, if you do things like RS with English, you might want to look at things like advertising, publishing, journalism, media, broadcasting, copywriting. If you're thinking RS with science, then you've got medicine, dentistry, veterinary practices, medical laboratories, research and development. And essentially, if you're interested in how any of these link together, all you have to do is ask, and I'll give you some additional information about how these work together. RS with maths, you've got banking, business management, retail. With geography, you could be a pilot, armed forces, aid agencies, charity worker, travel and tourism. So we've got all of these clear interlinks, and the skills that you're going to get from doing this subject would be you get to express your opinions, you have debates, you can analyze arguments, there's critical evaluations, you can question things that you're hearing and explain why you agree, why you disagree. You can look at different interpretations, which you'll be doing in things like English, where you have to unpick text. There's empathy, this clear and logical thinking, the development of literacy and oracy, this idea of negotiation, getting people to see your point of view, understanding that you might have to compromise. Organization will be a really key one, problem solving, research, and working to deadlines. Okay, so there's going to be lots of skills that are developed from taking this subject, which will help you when you go on to further education, but it'll also help you with any job that you choose to do in the future. Now, the hopes for trips post COVID, obviously, we haven't had the opportunity to do these because of the ongoing pandemic. But we're hoping that we're going to have a trip to Ulverston Buddhist Temple. And if we have enough numbers, we're hoping to be able to plan a trip to go to Rome for a few days to experience the culture of a place which has held Christianity at its roots. Okay, there won't just obviously be going to see churches. There will be the opportunity to see some of the major landmarks in Rome as well. But as I say, it'll be dependent on numbers, and it'll be dependent on how the pandemic's going at the time. But I don't want you to just take it from me, because obviously I'm biased. It's my subject, and so will Miss Iverson, who will also be there teaching you. But I want you to take it from some of the students that are taking this subject right now. So I'll give you some time to read these. So we've got Sadie in year 10 with the first one. Then I'll move this out of the way. So we've got Leah in year 11, and we also have Becky in year 11. So obviously you can pause it now, have a read through what it is that they're saying about the subject. They were asked to be completely honest about how they found the subject, and this is what they've come back with. Now, Leah is going to be taking it at A level, Becky's not, which is absolutely fine. You don't have to continue the subject, okay? So pause it here, have a read, and then press play, and we'll have a look at some more. Okay, so now that you've read those, then we've got this one here from Katie, and we've also got this one here from Lauren. Again, Kate's taking it A level, Lauren's not. Okay, there's no